What a great morning, and happy to come and speak to you about our efforts at the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative. In this space, DAC is a not-for-profit organization that came out of the World Economic Forum, and it is dedicated to driving globally inclusive research in Alzheimer's disease and dementia. As we have heard this morning, and the evidence that demonstrates the relationship between brain health and environment is in its early stages but continuously growing. And I guess most recently, a very interesting paper came out of Oxford in Nature relating modifiable risk factors to both studying the impact of genetics as well as modifiable risk factors on a brain network which goes first in Alzheimer's disease. And as you reflect on this paper, a couple of points stood out to me. First of all, it's great to study the impact of modifiable risk factors on an abnormal brain network. And by the way, I should let you know that amongst the top 3 modifiable risk factors that impacted this brain network were diabetes, alcohol intake, and air pollution. But I guess what stood out to me was that you have to be very careful about what's the endpoint that you're trying to measure when you measure brain health. Brain is a very complex organ. One thing I would like to say is that it's not good enough to study the impact of environment just on brain diseases and clinical diagnosis of neurodegenerative diseases. These diseases are slow-moving, long-running, and are often diagnosed very late. Too late for prevention. We have to also study the impact of the environment on brain health and the loss of brain health, and as well as early signs and symptoms of eventually clinically diagnosable diseases. So the first thing I would like to say is that let there be a common understanding of what brain health really is. It's a complex multifactorial measure that, as you will see on the diagram on the right, has a lot of inputs. And today, there is not a good measure of brain health. We would like to drive towards a globally accepted measure of brain health, a globally accepted brain health index, which is invariant to cultures, languages, and socioeconomic status. So that's a challenge ahead of us. The second thing I would say is that when we study the impact of environment and climate change stressors on brain health, we really have to study it in those places where this impact is the greatest. And a lot of the times, the people most impacted by environmental stressors are in low and middle income countries. And so we at DAC are making a special effort to understand this relationship between environment and brain health, where this impact, like I said, is the greatest. There is greatest vulnerability there. The people themselves have different diets, lifestyles, as well as comorbidities that make them perhaps inherently more vulnerable to the impact of environment on their brain health, as well as, of course, the climate change stressors are most present in these regions as well. So what are we doing about it? So we at DAC have started what we call a global cohorts program. We don't start these cohorts from scratch, but we take over sometimes and augment existing efforts in regions around the world and turn them into insightful studies to study the impact of climate change and brain health, early detection, et cetera, and many disease-related research sort of goals. And from the point of view of climate change, there are some things that we are standardizing in these cohorts across the world. One is some top-down measures that measure in a reliable way the environmental stressors. And we are particularly interested in satellite-based measures. I should point out here a partnership with International Health Metrics and Evaluation, IHME Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation. And then we are also standardizing plenty of bottoms-up measures. So individual level exposures we are measuring through wearables, gel bands. We are collecting biosamples where possible for exposome work. And perhaps very importantly, we have inserted into these cohorts assessments of cognition, memory, and attention that we think are robust to cultural and language variances. So essentially focusing on speech biomarkers, ocular biomarkers, olfactory measures, etc. And we take this suite, we call it the DAC digital suite, etc., and the DAC biosample protocol, and smear it across multiple cohorts around the world. On the right-hand side, you can see some of the active cohorts that we have. In Kenya, we are collecting data on brain health and cognition and memory, along with satellite-based data on heat and humidity exposure. In Egypt, we are starting a program to do the same, except that we will be focusing on air pollution. In South Colombia and in the Amazonia region, as well as in Chile, we are looking at pesticide exposure and its impact on brain health and cognition. And Chile is an interesting country, very north-south country, lots of variations, crop patterns, lots of variations in pesticides exposure, and we are looking to really take advantage of that. So these are just pilot programs. Our main goal is to go to the next slide. Our main goal is to really do this across the globe with multiple cohorts around the world. I told you that we are collecting data both at an aggregate level, at an individual level. You can see here some of the context around it, at the community level, at the individual level. We are starting partnerships around the world with local cohorts to collect these data in a standardized way. And then we have a very strong partnership with Alzheimer's Disease Data Initiative. This is a Gates venture-backed platform for ingesting curated and harmonized data from across different sources and bringing it all together so we can turn this into what we call a FAIR format and make it accessible to researchers around the globe. And this is really, I should emphasize this part actually. So we are collecting data in cohorts around the world, but we have our own data curation sort of service that we provide to make sure that these data sets are as standardized as possible before they get loaded into the ADDI platform. So I guess I would like to leave you with this notion that we at the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative are doing our best to collect data from those parts of the world where it's most lacking and where it's also most needed. And we are very open to folks partnering with us. We are open to making these data available as broadly and widely as possible. And hopefully we basically want to make a difference such that we not only understand the relationship between the environment and brain health and the loss of brain health, but based on local insights generated in those regions, we are able to come up with customized prevention programs and paradigms that work best in those particular regions.